Hello guys, my name is Goblin, and today we're going to be discussing how I think the classic WoW botting situation will totally ruin the economy of classic TBC. So it's no news to really anyone that the botting situation in classic WoW is pretty bad. You have, if you go to any half decent gold farming area in the open world right now, there's very likely going to be a bot there. I was watching a stream the other day of Fake QT who was going out and actually hunting down bots in the Hillsbrand foothills, I believe, or Arathi Highlands, and literally every single area where you can kill elementals was just dominated by a number of bots. And then on top of that we have hundreds of rogues in BRD doing the pickpocketing farming tactic in the arena. But let's talk about how this could potentially affect classic TBC. By the way guys, if you really liked the video, please consider subscribing and leaving a comment below, telling me what you think about this topic, because it is something interesting to talk about. So anyway, let's get into it. So in classic WoW we already have a pretty bad and inflated economy. Depending on what server you're playing on, it's going to be worse than other servers. This is largely to do with obviously botting, like I mentioned, but it's also to do with crazy AoE mage farming, like in Maradon and things like that, and then by extent also character boosting. People are making a lot of gold these days, and obviously the more and more rich people become on a server, the more the server's economy becomes inflated. The price of, for instance, something simple like an elemental fire for your fire protection potion, increases in price. Furthermore, because a lot of these bots are actually botting for a living, a lot of them aren't max level because they probably would get banned before they get max level, so what they're doing is getting to a certain level that they can confidently farm a certain reagent, farming it over and over again, making as much money as they can before they get banned, and then they are selling that gold for real money. And when you sell gold for real money and it becomes a real problem on a server, again it inflates the economy further because it's easier and easier to get gold, and the value of the currency of World of Warcraft gold starts to diminish and therefore inflate. If you want a real life anecdote of when this happened really bad, you only have to look to the 1923 hyperinflation of the German economic crisis, also known as the Weimar Republic crisis, although that's probably Weimar because they pronounce W's as V's. Anyway, long story short, loads of paper money was implemented into the economy, and then your loaf of bread would have cost 250 marks and then started to cost 200,000 marks. Long story short, the more gold in classic WoW, the more gold in classic TBC, the more expensive things will become. So let's introduce classic TBC to the equation. So first of all, one of the main ways to make gold in TBC is farming primals. This largely involves farming elementals in the open world. Primals are in extremely high demand and very essential for gear crafting. You can create pre-raid best in slot gear that will quite literally last 2 raid tiers, for instance Spell Strike, and then you've got really strong weapons like Storm Heralds and Dragon Mob. There's Primal Earth, Water, Fire, Air, Life and Shadow, although some of those are not, like Shadow and Earth, are not particularly that lucrative. It's mainly Mana, Air and Fire and Water. So if you think back to when people were farming elemental fire in classic WoW to make fire protection potions and things like that, all of the fire elemental areas in classic WoW were totally dominated by people farming, botters and just people of the opposite faction. And I even went at like 3 o'clock in the morning because I decided to do an all-nighter to fix my body clock a few months ago, and even at 3 o'clock in the morning there are people still farming these elementals over and over again. So you can definitely count on these areas going to be totally dominated by bots, and there's more actual areas available to them. There's loads of different areas across the entirety of Outland where you can farm a lucrative amount of motes of primals and whatever. So I can definitely foresee that the entirety of Outland is just going to be totally dominated by bots and gold selling farmers, Chinese farmers, whatever you want to call it. They will very likely be playing Warlock because Warlock can ping pong pull with their SL spec, which is Soul Link and Siphon Life, and they've become very tough, basically a very tanky Warlock, and they can range pull, and yeah, they can just like mob tag about 5 mobs and just soak up all that damage and dot up and kill them very efficiently. There's also gas cloud farming, which is very lucrative and probably will get spawn camped by bots it will essentially become the Black Lotus in Classic WoW. Obviously the Black Lotus will farm more money for your buck, but again, like, it's going to be one of those things that's just going to get camped. Because you can get about 4 motes per gas cloud, and to put that in perspective, it will take about, I mean, if you're really lucky, you can probably get 4 motes in 2 elemental kills, but it's more likely going to be, you know, 4 to 6 kills. It really depends on your luck, because sometimes obviously they don't drop, so you've got to bear that in mind. So these gas clouds are definitely going to be more lucrative than elemental farming. And the same thing that's happened in Classic WoW is going to happen in Classic TBC. People are going to make all this money by farming primals, a lot of primals. Bots will totally dominate the entirety of Outland, all of the spots, to the point where the normal average player probably won't even have much of a chance to actually farm any primals for himself, which means he'll have to rely entirely on purchasing primals from the auction house. Now, primals, like a lucrative primal, like primal fire or water or something like that, they will sell between, you know, 20 to 40 gold on the auction house, depending on what server you play. This is just from my experience of the servers I've played. You're probably going to be looking at triple figures, potentially triple figures for one primal, if this situation really does get out of hand. I mean, for instance, if you look at Classic WoW when it launched, an elixir of the mongoose would probably sell for, you know, 3 or 4 gold. When Classic WoW launched with them, everyone got richer, and now an elixir of the mongoose sells for about 20 gold. So that's an inflation of 4 times the value, probably, well, more like 4 times the value. So if it goes the same way with primals, then yeah, we're looking at triple figures when it comes to the, you know, predicted value of what primals are going to cost in Classic TBC. You can kind of understand why people really want a gold cap in Classic WoW, like a smaller gold cap, or a total gold reset, or fresh servers. You can understand why people want that, because yeah, the economy potentially, I mean, I may be being really pessimistic and doom and gloom, but I do think that if we run into Classic TBC with the current botting situation, the current economy situation, with all of the, you know, crazy mage AoE farms and everything providing lots and lots of people with loads of money, if we run into Classic TBC with all these things in place, yeah, it's going to be bad, in my opinion. It's going to be really bad. I think it will get to the point where a lot of people just won't be able to afford crafting, you know, Shadow Weave or Spell Strike and things like that. They just simply won't be able to afford it, and which will have some issues in itself, because it will mean that extremely rich people, or basically people who played Mage in Classic, will have a huge advantage over anyone who didn't. Which, overall, I just think is really bad for the community. I mean, the reason why it wasn't such an issue in the original retail TBC is because, obviously there was bots back then, but they weren't as sophisticated as they are now, and they weren't on such a large scale. Okay, because botting software, obviously, it's harder to detect now, it's way more advanced, and very recently, well, more like half a year ago I think this happened, Blizzard made many employees within the community management section redundant. So this is, you know, people who go on the forums, people who answer tickets, game masters, the kind of people who monitor servers for botting and, you know, antisocial behaviour, things like that. A lot of these people simply are not in the workforce anymore. So even when you see botters in the world and you report them, you're just less likely for anything to actually happen. This is why in Classic WoW there's so many bots just running free in the open world, because there's less people monitoring the situation. And obviously the botting situation on retail World of Warcraft probably has a higher priority, because more people play retail World of Warcraft by quite a country mile. Then, you know, it's basically, in the eyes of Blizzard, it's more important to monitor botting and antisocial behaviour on the retail realms. But trying to monitor it on retail and classic realms is obviously quite demanding, being proved by the fact that there's so many bots running free, and they, yeah, recently made loads of staff redundant, so it's pretty bad overall. This has been a bit of a doom and gloom video, but anyway, please consider subscribing to the channel, guys, if you want to see more content like this. My name is Goblin. Until my next video, ciao.